My name is Garth McKenzie and I'm a technical analyst and ETF strategist with Traders Corner. In this episode, I'm taking a look at the Nasdaq 100 index and how it's performed over the past week and what my scenarios are for the week ahead as we approach a big bounce in this market that's unfolded over the last 2 days. Now, the first chart that I'm taking a look at here is the Nasdaq 100 daily chart. And what's quite clear to see is that the index itself traded all the way down to the 200-day moving average last week. That was just below 8,200 level. And what you can see in the bottom frame of this chart is the VIX index, which correspondingly spiked up to around about 40 or just above 40 last week. So very big nervousness, a lot of aggression in the sell-off that we saw last week. But then on Friday, you saw that market bouncing quite nicely. And yesterday being Monday, we saw another very big bounce. Now, what I see potentially unfolding here is a possible volatile base beginning to form on the Nasdaq. And what that implies is that we probably don't see a big V-shaped recovery from here. We may actually double dip and move back down and approach those prior lows again at around 8,200. That's quite common behavior for a market that's sold off as aggressively as what we've seen here. But I think then we see this market trading in that range between 8,200 and around about 9,000, which is also where the underside of the 50-day moving average comes in. That's a nice broad range. That's about 10%. And typically in a very volatile situation like what we appear to be in at the moment, that's not uncommon for a market to trade in a volatile range like that. Now, there's 3 ETFs that I'm wanting to follow here and take a closer look at in terms of how one could possibly trade this volatility in the near term. The first one that I'm taking a look at is the ProShares Short QQQ. The share code here is PSQ. What this is, it's a 1x leveraged ETF on the Nasdaq 100. It's an inverse ETF. What it implies is that when the Nasdaq drops, this ETF will rise in price. And you can see that quite clearly last week. You'll notice how this ETF had a nice, powerful rally up from $22 all the way up to $26. Now, it's begun to come off a little bit now, and that's normal because of the fact that the Nasdaq itself has begun to bounce. But if my strategy or my scenario is right, that we see the Nasdaq coming into a bit of selling pressure at around that 9,000 area that I mentioned, then I think what that would imply is that you could look to buy this ETF on any pullback towards about $23. And I think you can trade that range between $23 and $26 quite comfortably. These ETFs are very, very liquid, plenty of activity, and nice level of activity and nice level of volatility to capitalize on in the near term, I believe. The next ETF that I'm taking a look at is, once again, an inverse ETF on the Nasdaq. This time it's the ProShares Ultra Short QQQ. So this one is a 2x leveraged ETF. It's a little bit more racy than the previous one that I mentioned, but you can see the chart structure here is almost identical. Once again, it's an inverse ETF. At this point, I see support at the bottom of the range coming in around about $20, maybe $21, and then you've got resistance up at $26. So once again, if we see this ETF pulling back into that support zone that I'm highlighting there at around 2050, I would look at that as a potential area to buy and then look to trade that range between $20 and $26. Now, the final chart and the final ETF that I'm taking a look at here is an ETF that's now 3x leveraged. So as you can see, we're moving up the leverage scale with each of these charts. The ProShares Ultra Short QQQ is the one we're looking at here. This is a 3x leveraged ETF. Share code here is SQQQ. And here, the support area that I'd be looking at is around about $18, and the resistance also up at about $26. So you can see that the ranges or the potential trading ranges for these ETFs expand as the leverage increases. So keep an eye on these for the week ahead. All of them potentially nice trading opportunities, I think. Just do be aware that in a very volatile environment, it's always a good idea to keep your position sizes a little bit smaller than normal, particularly if you're trading in these leveraged ETFs. That's all I've got this time. I'll be back with you next time for more analysis and more ETFs.